Finished your morning round, soldier? Yeah, figured. Sky hasn't changed, heater's still dead. Rations taste the same going in as they do coming out. And command's quiet, which usually means they've either forgotten about us or they're about to remember in the worst way possible. Me, I'm fine. Got my boots off, fire's holding, and you look bored enough to start asking dumb questions again. So sure, you want stories? Fine. Not like we've got anything better to do. Might as well give you rookies a preview of what you're actually in for. You ever notice how the forest sounds different at night? Not quieter, emptier. Like the wind's holding its breath. Like the trees are waiting for something to happen. Out here, that feeling never really leaves. You come back from patrol, check your gear, heat whatever passes for food. You talk a little, mostly to fill the silence. You scrape the mud off your boots, patch the holes in your socks, maybe curse at the heater when it kicks out for the third time. Then the quiet creeps back in. That's when the fire becomes everything. It's a little warmth, a little light, a little noise in a world that's too good at giving you none of those. And when you've got nowhere else to look, you end up staring into it long enough that the past starts crawling back up your throat. We've all been here long enough to know what this kind of night feels like, where no one wants to be the first to go to sleep because sleep makes the day come faster and the day's never better than the night. Out here, with half our team still wet from the last rain and the other half pretending their rations didn't taste like bootliner, you ask if I have any stories? Nah, it's alright. Someone always asks eventually. People think they want to hear what war is really like, but what they're picturing is different. Heroes and villains, brave stands, big sacrifices, but that's not what sticks with you. What sticks are the silences between firefights, the hours spent waiting for orders that never come, the way your boots start to smell after 4 straight rotations in the mud. The face of the person you let bleed out because the evac was 2 clicks too far. I remember the last time I was stationed at a place like this. It wasn't this moon, somewhere colder if you can believe it. Trees so tall they swallowed the sky, and everything smelled like sap and ozone. We had a listening post there, buried in the roots of an old comms tower stripped down from the Clone Wars. 8 of us, all crammed into a structure built for 4. No beds, no fresh food. We just slept in shift and took turns on watch, got used to eating with one hand on our blasters. We were supposed to keep an eye out, relay anything big, ship traffic, troop movement, distress calls, but nothing ever came. Weeks went by like that. At first, we joked about it. Called it a vacation post, made up fake missions just to keep morale up. But eventually, the boredom stopped being funny. You start looking at the trees different. Start wondering if every creak in the branches is a scout trooper watching you through a scope. You imagine footsteps, whispers. Start waking up in the middle of the night, convinced something's crawling up through the dirt outside your bedroll. The silence messes with you. It gets in you. Then one day, our scout didn't come back. She was the best one we had. Went out for a standard sweep, 20-minute loop tops. 20 minutes turned to 30, then an hour. We did a search, split into pair and fanned out through the trees. We left markers, pushed further than we should have, and nothing. We stayed another 6 days, and then command pinged us. New orders, immediate relocation, abandoned post. We packed what we could, burned what we couldn't, never got a reason why. That wasn't the last quiet post I served at. It wasn't even the strangest. But it was the first one that made me realize something. The rebellion doesn't hand out closure. No justice for the ones we lose. Sometimes not even a body. Just silence and the hope that one day someone finds the record and decides it mattered. That's what tonight feels like. Like a night where something already happened and we just haven't seen the shape of it yet. I don't say this stuff to scare you. I say it because eventually, someone always asks what it was like, what we did before this, what we've seen. So, here's your answer. We've seen too much. Too much waste, too much compromise, too many decisions that weren't clear when we made them, and still aren't. We all joined for reasons. We believed in something, still do maybe. but belief only gets you so far. The fight, it keeps going after the beliefs dried up. You end up moving forward on momentum alone, for your squad, for the ones who didn't come back, for the people who don't get to ask if it was worth it. The first time it broke for me, first time I realized this wasn't the war they sold us, that was Gorse. It was supposed to be clean, small op, in, out, grab a target, bring him back. Imperial logistics officer, mid-tier, the kind of man who moves numbers in crates, not people. Not important enough for a guard detail, but important enough that intelligence wanted to crack him open. We tracked him to Gorse, scarred planet in the Outer Rim. Used to be rich and thorolite. Mining corporations stripped it to the bones, then left the scraps behind. Now, it's just rock valleys, broken rail lines, and half-dead towns where the lights flicker. The kind of place the Empire forgets until they want to hide something. One cell had 4. 2 locals from a resistance ring operating out of the southern Ridgelands, tough types who knew the terrain better than they knew their own names. And 2 of us from Offworld. I was one of them. First op with this cell, first op that felt like it mattered. We'd been watching this old farmhouse near a collapsed strip mine for 3 nights. 2 levels, wide porch, and the roof patched with scavenged plating. Lights out by 2100 every evening. The target stayed upstairs. We confirmed that twice. He was just pacing, reading reports on a datapad, and he looked like he was waiting for a ship that hadn't arrived yet. He looked bored, and that should have told us something. But we were eager, sharp, figured it was now or never. The plan was simple. Hit the house before midnight. 1 lookout, 2 breaching, 1 on evac. Stun the target, bag him, and vanish. We ran the checklist 3 times and rehearsed every step. That was the plan. We moved in at 2300. Sky was clear, but the haze from the mines still hung low in the valleys. The ground felt soft, too soft. Gorse dirt didn't give like that unless something's been dug up recently. I should have noticed, should have stopped. We crossed the slope behind the house, rusted piping in the dirt and 1 broken wind vane squealing in the breeze. We breached through the back door. Quiet charge, no sound but our breath. Inside smelt like burnt synth oil and old bedding. We cleared the bottom floor, kitchen, hallway, storage, all quiet and all dead. And then a light came on upstairs. It was soft and warm, like a lamp someone forgot to turn off. The guy next to me froze. He was one of the locals, never said much, but he was solid. I trusted his instincts. The shot came through the ceiling. Garen went down instantly, shot clean through the chest plate. I fired back, up, blind. Muzzle flashes lit the top floor. 2 shooters, maybe more, moving in sync. 1 covering the stairs, another shifting room to room. You could hear them shifting the floorboards above. It was a trap. Intel got it wrong. I dragged Garen back toward the kitchen. His gear was slick with blood. Outside, our lookout opened up. Not at the house, but behind it. Stormtroopers, 2 squads, advancing through the ridgeline in formation. We were boxed. I grabbed Garen's datapad, his sidearm, the mission log, and didn't even look for the target. He wasn't the op anymore. Getting out was. Flash charged through the front window. I dove through the smoke. My boots hit gravel, then dust. Red haze was everywhere. Blaster bolts cracked past my ear, and 1 hit a rock close enough to chip my visor. Someone was yelling. Might have even been me. And we ran. Through the gully, across the old rail bridge, into the scrub where evac was supposed to be waiting. The evac pilot didn't say a word. We lifted off silently and fast. Back at station, command logged it as a failed retrieval. No confirmed enemy contact and no casualties. Just the box checked. Clean. I washed Garen's blood off my gloves in the barracks sink. Water ran pink for 5 minutes. I didn't speak to anyone for 2 days. Garen had been with me since my first assignment off-world. He gave me his last stim shot on a night patrol when mine cracked. He once fixed my rifle without being asked. Just nodded and said, can't afford a jam on the job. This next one was an unexpected experience. We weren't even supposed to land. It was a routine supply run. 5 crates of food, some ammo, 1 encrypted holopad with coordinates for the next cell rotation. Fly in quiet, drop the gear, fly out. That was it. It was the kind of mission Command doesn't even bother to mention in the reports unless something goes wrong. But something went wrong. They hit us just before re-entry. One moment we're drifting in toward orbit, and the next we're taking flak from a mountaintop battery that shouldn't have existed. Our pilot tried to break atmosphere and bounce, but they clipped the tail stabilizer. We spun, fast, sideways, fire licking through the rear cargo hatch. By the time we hit dirt, half the transport was slagged and the other half was upside down in a grove of blackwood trees. Only 5 of us crawled out. Pilot was dead, 2 others still inside, burning. And we didn't land anywhere near the drop point. We were deep inside what turned out to be an Imperial training zone. They were already hunting us before we even got our bearings. First night was all running. They had tracker droids, motion sensors, and a high ground advantage. We had blasters, half a map, and a wounded comtech whose leg was bleeding through a field dressing. I remember the trees being too close together. The canopy blocked the moons. You couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. Every branch looked like a silhouette with a rifle. We moved in silence, didn't light fires, ate cold rations. Water filters barely worked. Second night, we made a stand, briefly. Found an overhang along a ridge with only one path up, and it gave us a firing line. We didn't plan to fight, but they found us anyway. We broke position, and 2 of us got separated. Never found them again. That left me, a fresh-faced kid, and the wounded tech. The kid couldn't have been more than 19, maybe less, barely taller than the blaster he carried. Voice still cracked when he talked, but he carried the tech on his back for 3 clicks, through mud, through thorn, through a ravine that we had to wade across chest deep in the freezing water. He never once complained, even when his arm got grazed by a glancing shot from a scout trooper, even when we had to ditch the rest of the gear to move faster, even when the data card with the mission logs got soaked and he pulled it from the wreckage like it was a sacred relic. He carried that too, but wouldn't let go of it. On the 4th day, we hit the fallback beacon. Old rebel pickup site, hidden in the roots of a collapsed tree. I triggered the emergency signal, and somehow, someone was listening. Transport came low and fast. The hatch opened, and there was an outstretched hand and a lot of noise. The kid handed me the data card before we boarded. Said, "You should be the one to log it." I told him we'd write it up together. He smiled, kind of half sure, like he didn't believe me, but appreciated the lie. When we touched down at the safe house, he was gone. Someone said he got reassigned. Someone else said he was picked up by Intel, maybe recruited for courier work. The official report marked equipment delivery failure. No combat loss. That was the mission that taught me war doesn't wait for orders. It doesn't care if you're supposed to fight. It doesn't care if you're trained or if you're tired. It finds you wherever you are. Sometimes you come out the other side, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you do, and they forget to write your name down. That kid, bravest soldier I ever damn met. Still don't know if he made it out of this war, but if he's alive, well, he has my utmost respect. Sometimes, the worst part of this godforsaken war isn't the fighting, it's the helplessness. I remember this one time. We were in some desert, I can't recall. All those desert moons start to blur after a while. Doesn't matter the system, doesn't matter what sun is hanging overhead. Once you've walked through enough of them, they all start to feel like the same stretch of horizon. Flat, colorless, and indifferent. The ground crunches under your boots like brittle bone. The wind never stops, scraping dust against your visor, whispering through every crack in your gear. Sand gets into everything. Your pack, your lungs, your head. Ah, that's right, it was a Vala 7. Dry rock ball out in the outer rim. Hardly shows up on sector maps unless you're looking for trouble. Intel said the Empire had a passive listening post buried near the edge of Sector H, deep in the southern canyons. The kind of setup they use when they want to track rebel chatter without anyone knowing they're listening. Supposed to be a short recon, low risk, 3 of us, no contact, just verify the sensor signature and log coordinates for a follow-up strike team. Easy, simple. We didn't expect to find people. We spotted the village from a ridge near the second day's hike. Didn't show up on our maps. If you weren't standing there looking straight at it, you'd never know it existed. Maybe 20 homes, built into the rock and dust. Sandstone walls, worn tarps stretched between rooftops for shade. Everything patched, scavenged, lived in. No signs of vehicles, no antenna arrays. They had tech, it was older than the Clone Wars. I remember someone muttered, "Where the hell did they come from?" No one had an answer. We posed as traders. It wasn't a hard sell. I mean, our ship barely worked as it was, and one of my squad mates, a former cargo runner, actually was a trader once. Knew how to talk like one too. Made us look harmless, even when we're carrying blasters under our coats. The villagers let us stay the night. Wasn't much, a spot in the grain hut, flat mats on a stone floor and cracked ceilings. The air inside smelled like dried plants and sunburned rope. Still better than some billets I've slept in. They gave us food too, some kind of bread made from local root flour, hard as plastoid, and some bitter tea boiled from a spiky herb that grew near the wells. The water though, tasted wrong. First sip, and you could tell, metallic, harsh, left a film on the inside of your mouth. Our medic ran a scan when no one was looking. Trace levels of heavy metals. Nothing instantly lethal, not in one drink, but enough that long-term exposure would cause internal damage, especially in kids. We ran a quiet sweep of the ridge the next morning, and found the source. Half a click uphill, buried halfway into a cliff, was a venting pipe, hidden by natural rock. It was bleeding some type of pale runoff into the sand and downhill into the aquifer. It had Empire written all over it. You could tell from the manufacturing marks. It was a standard off-grid waste disposal line, probably tied to a camouflaged relay site deeper in the valley. The villagers had no idea it was there. They'd been drinking that water for years. We tried to warn them. We told them that the water might be unsafe, that there was something uphill they should avoid, that maybe the well needed testing. But most of them didn't believe us. One man accused us of trying to scare them off their land, said we were drifters trying to stake a claim. Another said outsiders always lied. Some just stared. The elder, a man in his 70s at least, half-blind, skin like cracked clay, asked if we could fix it. We looked at each other. No one said anything for a beat too long. Then I lied and said we'd try. We sent the report that night. Flagged the vent pipe, logged coordinates, labeled it as a Class 2 contamination risk tied to illegal Imperial infrastructure. Command's reply came back in 2 lines. Location confirmed. Non-strategic population density. Redirect to next priority. Cleanup was denied. We pushed back. We even tried to contact a sympathetic logistics officer we'd worked with once before. It didn't matter though. Second message came down stamped red. Order acknowledged. Proceed per routing. We stayed another day and then we left. I remember looking down from the viewport as the transport lifted off. The village got smaller, dust curling around the roofs, kids running between houses. They were waving, like we'd done something good. 3 months later, I pulled a favor with a slicer I knew, asked him to dig through Sector H's civilian records. He found one, a resettlement report from Imperial Survey Command. The village was gone. Official cause, environmental collapse due to unregulated settlement. I sometimes think about that elder sometimes. Think about how he asked without begging, how he didn't plead. He just wanted the truth and a chance to keep his people breathing. We said we'd help, but we lied. Alright, that's enough sand for one night. You want another? There's one about a place where we actually won, sort of, but it didn't feel like it. Sometimes you get lucky. Doesn't mean it feels good. We got word of a small Imperial relay post sitting out in deep space, nowhere special. Drifting off a minor hyperspace lane tucked between nav buoys that hadn't been serviced in years. They called it Ash Station. The only reason anyone even knew it existed was a passing freighter that caught a sliver of a passive signal and logged it by mistake. Transmitted on a dead frequency, something the old separatists used to do during the war. Command flagged it fast, said it was worth checking out, could be a listening post. But in our experience, when the Empire goes to the trouble of making something invisible, it usually means they don't want anyone asking questions. So they sent us, small team, 4 of us, plus a pilot. Told us it was low risk, a skeleton crew needed at best. The objective was to board, sweep, secure the data core, and extract. Textbook. We dropped out of hyperspace an hour after local midnight. It looked like a refueling depot, or maybe an old relay site from the Clone Wars that got repurposed. Cylindrical hull, dish array on the spine. The lights were on. Soft yellow glow across the viewports, like it had been left running for guests that never arrived. We circled once, nothing moved. No external damage, just that weak ping. We docked on the secondary port. The hatch opened after one override attempt. And then we went in. There's a kind of quiet that stations aren't supposed to have. Even the abandoned ones usually hum with air scrubbers, radiators, something ticking in the walls. Ash Station was silent. No echoes or vibrations, nothing. Just that stale, slightly sweet air that ships get when no one's opened a hatch in too long. We started our sweep. The halls were lit, systems powered, consoles on standby. But no one was there. We cleared the first level, storage, utility rooms, backup generator. It was just racks of unused gear, unopened rations, uniforms still folded. The medical bay was spotless. No logs on the patients. It was like no one had ever bled in that room. The rec room still had a sabak hand mid-game. The weirdest thing though was the droid. An old T7 unit, an industrial model, wandered past us in the main corridor. It just kept pacing the same path, left to right, right to left. One squeaky wheel, like it had been doing that for years. We tried to interface with it and got nothing. The system core had been wiped. On the 3rd level, we found the command terminal, primary data access. Still active and still warm, but all logs had been scrubbed. Nothing in the recent activity queue. Every field was blank, like someone hit reset 10 minutes before we arrived. Except one, buried 2 directories deep, under a system labeled maintenance backup. A hollow file. Weird, so we played it. It was a prisoner. Male, mid-30s by the look of him. Standard rebel field fatigues, blood on his collar, restraints at the wrists and ankles. He was tied to a chair in a cold room with durasteel walls. Just him, half-conscious, lips cracked, face bruised in a dozen places, and whispering, "Don't send me there. Please, please, I told you everything, just don't send me there." He kept repeating it, over and over, and then the feed cut to static. That was the only file left in the system. We backed out slow after that, took the data core, grabbed the rations, the spare medkits, filed the all clear and transmitted the coordinates for pickup. Command called it a strategic success, said we'd liberated the station, even filed a commendation. We got name dropped in the after action report. Someone up the chain damn called it a perfect op. But it wasn't perfect. There was no sign of an evacuation, or a firefight, or a prisoner transfer. Just absence. Someone had scrubbed the place clean and left one file. Was it a warning, or was it a test? We never found out who he was. Ash Station was struck from the active roster 2 weeks later, deemed non-viable for strategic reuse. Far as the rebellion was concerned, it never existed. But I still remember the smell inside, like scorched plastic and something sweeter, rotten underneath, like it had been waiting. This next one, they told us it'd be quick, in and out. It was on Morden, a deep industrial world, mostly dead now. once ran full tilt with Techno-Union factories grinding through rock and atmosphere like they were trying to kill the planet on purpose. After the Clone Wars, most of it got shut down, but the Empire held on to pieces. Relay towers, sensor arrays, the kind of infrastructure that doesn't need people, just silence. Command flagged one of those towers. Tucked into an old ore processing plant, half buried, they said if we knocked it offline, it'd blind the local grid long enough for a fleet group to move without pinging Imperial eyes. We were the team sent to do it. We inserted under a storm front, one of those crackling electrical systems that never stopped circling the upper atmosphere. Ship came in low, barely held position long enough to drop us. We landed on the roof. It was slick with grime and wind-blown soot, the kind of place that hasn't seen real maintenance since the Republic fell. The tower was a rusted column of steel and ceramic piping with one sad little status light still pulsing red. We moved fast, timers set, charges distributed. One on the main relay, one on the backup node, one to cook the core. We were halfway through the first sequence when everything changed. Our sensors lit up. External ping. We'd been tagged. Uplink came from outside the facility. Maybe an orbital station, maybe another relay node underground. Either way, someone was watching. Someone knew we were there. We triggered the fallback timer. 3 minutes. It wasn't enough to blow the entire structure, but it'd be enough to melt the key circuits and make the whole tower blind for at least 48 hours. More than enough for the fleet to move. But that meant we had to hold. No evac until the core was slagged. No turning back. So we dug in. The first shot came 30 seconds in. High angle, sniper, top of a crane that had been dead for 2 decades. We didn't even think to check it. The bolt missed me by a meter and hit the wall hard enough to spray molten duracrete into my visor. Found cover behind what looked like a fallen Separatist droid tank. One of those spidery ones, half sunk in rust, probably left over from the Techno-Union retreat. Still reeked of ozone and oil. That's when the boots hit the ground. 2 squads, stormtroopers. We laid down suppression fire. For 3 minutes, we held. 3 minutes. Blaster bolts lit the sky like lightning. Every breath tasted like metal. The walls shook from the wind and the heat coming off the relay tower. I remember seeing one of the soldiers take a shot full on in the chest and keep coming. Could have been adrenaline, could have been something worse. 90 seconds in, one of ours took a hit. Shoulder, deep. Dropped his rifle but didn't scream. Just rolled, drew his sidearm and kept firing with his left hand like nothing had changed. By then, the outer catwalk was sparking. The power grid was buckling. Tower was vibrating under our boots like it wanted to shake loose and fall sideways. 30 seconds left. They pushed harder. We dropped a thermal round near the crane to force a retreat, and it didn't work. One soldier tried to flank through the upper service corridor. I hit him with a stun burst. Direct hit. When the timer hit 0, the whole station shook. The relays burned, the core slagged, the tower went dark. Mission complete. But we were still on the roof, and evac hadn't cleared the storm yet. 10 seconds later, we saw it. A freighter, battered, flying low and stupid through the cloud wall. It hovered above the tower like it didn't believe what it was seeing. We were told to move. I grabbed our injured squad mate. His arm was bad, but he was still breathing. We hauled him up and rolled him into the open bay as the pilot gunned the engines and broke atmosphere like hell was chasing us. Back on the ship, I thought he'd made it. He was quiet, no pulse on his lower arm, but I figured it was shock. I was wrong. He died before we hit orbit. They gave us a mission complete. Said it was a clean op, minimal casualties. Said it bought us the window we needed. But I still think about that timer. 3 minutes. That's all it took to break a network. That's all it took to lose someone who should have made it home. 3 minutes doesn't sound like much until you're in it, until you're counting, until every breath feels like it might be your last and you keep taking them away because someone next to you needs cover. I think we need to rekindle this fire soon though, boys. But if you want another, I've got one. About a cold moon, and a set of motion pings that didn't belong to us. The thing about cold is that it gets into your thinking. It's not like the heat. Heat makes you panic, makes you sweat, lash out, lose focus. But cold convinces you you're fine, even when you're dying. Your skin goes numb, your breath turns shallow, and somewhere in your head, you start mistaking stillness for safety. That was Karlach for us. Frozen outer rim backwater. Planet nobody charts unless they're desperate for a shortcut or hiding from something bigger. It used to be a Mandalorian outpost during the Clone Wars. Mining colony maybe. Tech scattered across the surface like broken teeth. Rusted gun emplacements, power cores cracked in half, prefabs half swallowed by snowdrifts. The Empire didn't care about Karlach, which, of course, made it perfect for a quiet little relay station that no one was supposed to notice. A dead channel repeater, patched into old separatist subspace hardware. But some officer back in command flagged it as strategically valuable. Said it could be reactivated for listening post triangulation. So they sent us in to monitor it. 5 of us, 2 techs, 2 scouts, and me. Dropped in by a short hop freighter that didn't even bother to power down. Just kicked us onto the ridge, then vanished into the clouds. We were told it'd be 2 weeks, max. Low activity, low temperature. No one in their right mind would be out there. Just rotate the logs, run diagnostics, keep the systems from freezing solid. We set up in the relay's lower levels, a repurposed bunker built into the ice wall itself. Everything creaked. The power grid flickered every time the wind outside hit the threshold, but the heat held and we weren't dead. That was enough. But then, the 3rd night. One of the scouts had the midnight shift. He came back looking pale. Said he saw lights near the canyon wall out past the southeast ridge. We brushed it off. Said it was the aurora. Karlach's upper atmosphere is full of ionic crap. Pretty, but in a dangerous kind of way. It wouldn't be the first time light bent funny and scared someone half to death. But then, the motion sensor pinged. Just one blip, right after midnight, South Ridge. Held for 2 seconds, then vanished. Our tech said it was probably a wiring issue. The whole station was duct tape and salvage. But just to be safe, he ran a full system check. Next morning, he came back quiet. Sensors clean, he said. Reading was real. We boosted the array, widened the range. Next night, it pinged again. Same place, same time. Then again the night after that, and the night after that. Never more than a single contact, but always there. Like it wanted to be seen. Like it knew the range of our sensors and was dancing right along the edge. On night 6, one of our guys volunteered to take a closer look. Said he wanted to check the outflow duct anyway. Pressure had dropped on the monitor. Could have been ice clogging the vent. He left just before sundown. Came back an hour later and hardly spoke after. Then finally, he said, "There's a hole." Next morning, we followed him out, South Ridge, 1.6 clicks from the relay entrance. He was right. There was a hole, perfectly round, 2 meters wide, cut into the ice like it had been carved by a blade made of heat and gravity. A clean frost curling around the rim like it had always been there. It looked wrong. We dropped a sensor drone. It blinked green for 3 seconds and then cut out, gone, like it dropped off the face of reality. Our tech ran a diagnostic on the drone's last signal. Null zone, he said. Dead space. Same kind of thing you'd see in magnetic caves on Dantooine. But this isn't rock, this is ice. There's no reason for a null zone out here. We asked command for permission to seal the hole, and they told us to hold position. Said the anomaly wasn't threatening. Said to continue scheduled maintenance and wait for further orders. On night 10, we lost someone who didn't come back. He went out just before full dark. Said he wanted to double check the relay antenna before the storm front hit. We waited, half an hour, then pinged his transponder. One signal, weak, fading, then nothing. We found his footprints in the snow, leading straight to the hole, but none coming back. The other tech said we should log it, mark the hole and wait for evac, but I'd seen the boots. I knew Dren's walk, and I knew what his absence meant. I took a charge pack from the supply crate, hiked out there alone, set the charge and primed the timer. I watched the frost crack, watched the rim collapse in on itself, watched the snow fill the hole like it was glad to have the chance. Then I walked back. 2 days later, evac came. No questions asked. They logged our lost friend as missing during external maintenance. No mention of the blips, no mention of the hole, no mention of the sensor drone or the null zone or the cold that seemed to watch you when you turned your back. They shut the relay down a week later, pulled the next team before they ever arrived, buried the whole thing under red tape and snow. But you know what still gets me? The sensor array. Even after I sealed the hole, it kept pinging, like it didn't matter what we did. But that's Karlak for you. If you spend long enough on a frozen rock, you stop believing in ghosts and start believing in patterns. Ish, you guys still want another after that? Because after that op, I stopped thinking the weird stuff was just a coincidence. I remember one time, we were stationed in the ruins of an old ore refinery. Underground, cold as hell, half the corridors were caved in from seismic activity, the other half reinforced with scrap durasteel we welded in ourselves. It had once been Imperial, back in the early days after the Clone Wars, then it got stripped and left behind when the supply routes shifted. The kind of place no one missed, which made it perfect for people like us. There were 9 of us total at the time, our cell. We ran high risk, high reward ops. Raided convoys, tracked troop redeployments, sabotaged fuel depots, and tapped communications lines. Not the glamorous stuff you hear in Alliance broadcasts. We knew each other well, trusted each other like you only can when your life's in someone else's hands 6 times a week. Then, Command sent another team. Said they were support, temporary, needed us to coordinate logistics and forward staging for something bigger. We made room, literally. Cleared out 3 bunks, expanded the mess schedule, shared the heater, even though we barely had enough power to keep it running through the night. But it didn't take long to realize something was off. That other team, 4 of them, weren't like us. Older, harder, the kind of rebels who didn't blink at body counts as long as the objective was met. They didn't talk about freedom, didn't talk about restoring the Republic or justice or anything you'd put on a flag. They talked about damage, about making sure the Empire bled. We kept our heads down, figured we could ride it out until they rotated off, but then we got the op brief. Outbound freighter convoy, Celestin Colony Moon. Little industrial colony orbiting high above the lava flows, old enough to be overlooked, busy enough to matter. Intel said there'd be a supply convoy launching in 4 days. 4 freighters, 1 armed lead transport and a rotating escort. But it wasn't the cargo that caught our attention. It was the passenger manifest. One of our guys flagged it. There were civilians on board, 24 of them, mostly engineers, freight techs, a few with families, transit workers, relocated to Celeste for refinery duty and now being shuttled out with the cargo. We brought it to the briefing. 9 of us, 4 of them, 1 table. The op was simple on paper. Hit the convoy hard, jam the distress beacon, scavenge what we could, and vanish. But with that manifest, it got murky. One of ours said we should call it off. Too much grey. If we went after that convoy, we'd be hitting people who'd never held a blaster in their lives. But the other team didn't hesitate. Their lead just stared at the data like it annoyed him. They're traveling under an Imperial escort, he said. They're part of the system. Might not be pulling the trigger, but they're feeding the machine. Another one added, the Empire does this all the time. Slip civilians into the manifest so we back off. Every time we let one go, they learn. I tried to redirect, ask if we could divert, delay, scare them off course instead of opening fire. They didn't bite. They called it strategic intimidation. Said the greater good was worth a few hundred regrets. The room went silent. I wanted to speak up, but I needed to think first. This other squad, they weren't monsters. They weren't fanatics. They were just tired soldiers trying to make the pain mean something. But somewhere along the line, they'd stopped seeing people. They saw math, ratios, loss weighed against outcome. So I asked the question, what happens after we win? If we become what they are to get there? No one answered. The op stayed on the board. Command didn't intervene. The other team started prepping. We didn't fight them, we just acted. We looped their comms with a false green light from traffic control, swapped the shuttle ignition core, rerouted their fuel rations, and pulled the timing circuit from their onboard nav. By the time they realized something was wrong, the freighter convoy had already left orbit. They packed their gear, filed out that night, and didn't come back. We never saw them again. I think about them sometimes, because they weren't wrong about what the Empire does. The Empire weaponizes sympathy, hides behind the people it enslaves. But if you start seeing everyone as a potential shield, eventually you stop seeing anyone at all. That's the line. That's the choice. You guys still feeling warm? Well, this next one's not about me. It's about a guy I met on Ord Mantell. Might have been our best contact, might have been our worst mistake. We were holed up after a cargo run went sideways. Lost half the shipment and one of our best couriers. We'd barely made it off-world, ship limping, morale lower than hull integrity. Command told us to sit tight, lay low, wait for reroutes, so that's what we did. Didn't trust the local comm lines and didn't trust the streets either. Most of the squad kept to the ship, but I decided to go for a walk. Found myself in one of those half-lit cantinas you only get on places like Mantell. Ceiling too low, music too loud, smell like burnt coolant and cheaper spice. I grabbed a table in the back, near the wall. Didn't plan on staying long, nor did I plan to talk to anyone, just wanted to take my mind off things. That's when he sat down. Mid-40s, maybe. Human. Civilian clothes, neutral tones, neat creases. Too clean for this district. Haircut close, but not military. Face clean-shaven. There weren't any weapons that I could see, but he didn't move like someone unarmed. He just eased into the chair across from me and set down 2 glasses. Said something like, "You look thirsty, thought I'd fix that." I didn't answer, didn't drink either. Not yet. He talked like we were old friends catching up after a few years apart. Started light, shipping lanes, fuel prices, trade disruptions. Then he got more specific. Mentioned a convoy reroute in Sector 4. Named 2 rebel supply nodes we'd used back in the early days. One already abandoned, the other supposedly still active. Then he listed a few rebel names. People I hadn't seen in a long time. Some still alive, some not. I kept my face flat, didn't blink and didn't shift. But inside, alarms were going off. My hands stayed under the table, ready. Then he leaned in. Played dumb. Told him I was a mechanic. Said I worked in hangars, fixed stabilizers and power couplings. He smiled. Not mockingly, but just knowing. Like he was watching someone try to lie with the wrong script. Then he slid something across the table. A small data chit. "Next time you're ready to fight smarter," he said, "you'll know who to call." Then he stood up. I blinked once and he was gone. No trace. Didn't see anyone else react to him at all. I didn't tell the others at first. Back at the ship, I checked the chit. Didn't plug it into anything, it was too risky. Just held it in my palm and thought about the questions I didn't ask. Had one of our own sent him? Was he with intelligence? ISB? Was he even real? Our slicer offered to scan it. Took her 5 hours and 3 different ISO-link setups before she gave up. Said the encryption was non-standard, layered. Not Alliance, but not Imperial either, at least not anything that she'd seen. She thought it might be some kind of private network protocol, something Black Ops, something old. Eventually, I turned it over to command. No choice really. They took it and logged it, said thanks. Then, 3 days later, 2 of our neighbor cells went dark. Both cells had been operating in the sector the man mentioned. Command didn't connect the dots, or didn't say they did. Me? I stopped sleeping right. I've thought about him more than I care to admit. Some days, I think he was an Imperial agent, testing us, feeling for weak points in the net. Other days, I think he might have been trying to help, a former asset or someone buried too deep to escape. Maybe a ghost from intelligence, someone who got out, but not cleanly. Or maybe he was a rebel, one who saw the cracks in the cause before the rest of us did. I will never know. That shit never showed up again. Some nights I think about cracking it open, but mostly I think it was a door, and I didn't step through. It's getting a bit colder now, isn't it? Well, you guys still want more? I've got one about a rebel pilot. Flew like she had nothing left to lose. Bought us 7 extra seconds that saved a dozen lives. They called it the Blackout Run. We were moving supplies through the Anawat sector, edge of the Ivax Nebula. 3 freighters, 2 Gozanits, and a refitted cargo barge that wheezed like it was dying every time it dipped below cruising speed. We were packed with stolen gear, power converters, crate rations, de-icing fuel for cold weather units. Nothing glamorous, but we needed it. Someone always needed it. We had no fighter escort. Command said the lane was quiet, low risk, they said. You'll be ghosts, they said. But we weren't ghosts, we were targets. Just past Burn & Con's orbital edge, we got pinged. I remember leaning over the console, watching the proximity light blink once, then again. Too fast for drift, too close for debris. I didn't even have time to tell the pilot before the first ties dropped in. 4 of them in a perfect wedge, sliding out of a sensor shadow like they'd been waiting there all day. They opened fire immediately. The first Gozanti took a shot across the bow, then one to the engines. It vented atmosphere for 6 seconds. 6 seconds. Then the whole aft hull buckled and she was gone. The second freighter tried to break formation. Big mistake. It peeled off, hoping to make a jump on a blind heading, but you can't trust hyperspace that close to Anawat's gravity well. They jumped anyway, and we never heard from them again. That left us, 1 barge. No guns, no shields. A flight deck with 3 terrified techs and 1 pilot who was already whispering prayers to any god who listened to deserters and smugglers. I was at the comms, trying to scream for help on a busted channel. I for sure thought that was it. I mean, we all did, even the pilot. She turned to look at me once, and her eyes said what her mouth wouldn't. There's no one coming. Not for us. Then it showed up. 1 ship, no markings, tie frame but customized. Wings welded from mismatched panels, one of them painted red, or maybe scorched that way. The cockpit glimmered like it had taken a dozen hits and never been repaired right. It flew straight into the tie formation. I've seen hot shots and burnouts and prodigies, but this was different. It wasn't dogfighting, it was hunting. The first tie, gone in the opening pass. The second tried to counter-roll and caught it in their sights. The mystery tie dropped under, looped around and clipped it with a blast that you could see from the next system. Third and fourth broke formation. That was their mistake. It spun the fighter around like it wasn't worried about the torque or G's. Took them 1 by 1. I swear to you, 90 seconds. That's all it took. We watched from the viewport and none of us moved. I couldn't even breathe because I was trying to convince myself it was real, that we hadn't already died and this was some final kindness from the galaxy before we faded out. When the last tie exploded, it didn't leave. It slowed, turned, and drifted alongside us. For a heartbeat, I thought it might finish the job. Maybe we'd wandered into something worse than imps. Maybe we were watching a ghost or something older. It hovered just long enough to see the pilot. The cockpit was cracked, the hull scored. There were old kill marks under the wing, etched in, not painted. Some of them looked imperial, others didn't. I looked into the visor, and I could make out that she was human, but I couldn't see her face. Something told me though that she was looking right back. Then, without a sound, Without even a signal, she turned, kicked the drive, and vanished into hyperspace. We scanned the area. Nothing. Just empty space and 6 people trying to understand why they were still alive. I've heard stories since then about rogue ties, about defectors who kept their ships and vanished into the edges of the galaxy, about pilots who lost everything and just kept flying because stopping would mean they had to feel it. Some say she's one of ours, some say she's one of theirs, others think she doesn't exist at all. Some rebel myth stitched together from trauma and wishful thinking. But I was there. We filed the report. Command said we were saved by an unknown friendly. Marked it non-actionable. Didn't want to waste resources chasing ghosts. But before they closed the log, I slipped in one note. If you see a red-marked tie with no ID, don't engage. Let her pass. You owe her more than you'll ever know. Sometimes, I wonder if she's looking for someone. Maybe she's still looking, or maybe we were just a stop along the way. All I know is, if I ever see that red stripe again, I won't ask questions. I'll nod and watch her go, because whatever war she's fighting now, it's hers. And I'm not sure we'd survive if we tried to follow. There was a time when we were cut off for 5 days. We were caught in a massive storm. Thick, grey-black clouds stacked in walls. Lightning arcs so dense, you can hear the air screaming. Wind sharp enough to sandblast Durasteel. They said it might last a day, maybe 2. We dropped anyway. Command wanted real-time intel on Imperial logistics. Troop shifts, fuel routes, supply landers, all skimming along the northern coastline. Eyes-only recon, they called it. In, observe, out. We had a prefab recon shelter, solar repeaters, 2 power cells, and rations for a week. Plenty for a short op. What we didn't have, after day 2, was leadership. Our officer was a lieutenant, young, barely out of an academy. His uniform was still too crisp when we landed. You could tell he still believed the manual had all the answers. The first 2 days, he held it together, kept shifts rotating, rationed battery life, and set up a fallback perimeter like protocol said. We logged 2 freighter flights and 1 scout patrol along the coast. All pretty standard, but the storm didn't pass. On day 3, the horizon was nothing but smoke and static. The shelter creaked like it was coming apart. We took turns sleeping in shifts, but the noise made the rest impossible. The air inside turned sour with condensation and nerves. That's when the lieutenant started pacing. Back and forth across the floor, like if he stopped, the walls would cave in. He stopped logging sightings, started second-guessing the sensor array, said the Empire might have found our signal, that they were jamming us deliberately. He said we'd be hit by sundown. On day 4, he stopped sleeping. His eyes were bloodshot, his hand shook when he touched his datapads. He snapped at one of the scouts for asking about evac patrol. Then he did something I won't forget. He started talking to the holotable, like there was someone on the other end of a transmission that wasn't even active. Day 5, he snapped. He laid out a plan, said we needed to move inland, north, away from the coast, so there was an Imperial comms relay embedded in a rock shelf. Our maps didn't show anything, but he insisted and said we had to strike first. He said waiting was suicide, that if we stayed, we'd be overrun by nightfall. We tried to reason with him, told him the storm would tear us apart before the Empire got close. We told him that moving blind through the cliffs in this weather was suicide, but he was past listening. He ordered packs loaded, ordered our fallback shelter burned so we'd leave no trace, and then he demanded the field codes from our medic. That was the line. Field codes initiate what's called Breakglass Protocol, a last-ditch fallback ping that sends encrypted emergency signals across multiple sectors. If we triggered that beacon mid-storm, there was a chance Imperial long-range scanners could intercept it. If they picked it up, we'd be handing them a map straight to our position. I took the codes, walked over while he was gearing up, and unclipped the datapad from his belt. Held it in both hands so he'd know I wasn't backing down. He reached for his blaster, voice shaking, eyes wide with desperation. "I'm responsible for this team," he said. "You give this order," I told him, and no one walks away clean. He stood there, frozen. Then he sat in the corner of the shelter, knees pulled in, staring at the wall. Didn't speak again for the rest of the day. We held the position, shaky but alive. Kept the heat low, power on trickle. Then, sometime around dawn, the sky cracked open. The storm broke like someone flicked a switch. Clear skies, calm wind, signal relay lit up with green bands. We got a ping from command 8 hours later, and evac came in fast. I told them everything in the debrief, didn't sugarcoat it, and didn't try to paint myself as a hero. Command nodded and said I handled it with discretion. Said the lieutenant would be reassigned for rest and evaluation. I never saw him again, but I kept something. His code cylinder. Still clipped to my belt even now. Doesn't really do anything anymore, but I keep it. It's a reminder that when orders stop coming, somebody still has to decide what's right. Guys aren't tired yet? Story's still keeping you up? Well, okay. This next one's not really about me. It's about someone I left behind on purpose. This one started with a message we almost missed. It said 3 words. Activate retrieval protocol. That was all. But those 3 words came from a man buried inside Naraka, a cliffside imperial prison complex at the edge of the rim. Place was a myth to most of us. A shadow facility buried under slag mountains and storm-choked skies. You didn't get sent to Naraka because you were dangerous. You got sent because someone wanted you gone. We knew the man inside only by a codename, Bridgewire. He was one of ours, a former intelligence tech who volunteered to go dark. Walked straight into an arrest 2 years prior on a forged ID and never resurfaced. We thought it'd been lost. Then, the intel started coming in. Little things at first. Names, schedules, disappearances, then facility layouts and shipment paths. It took months to connect the dots, but once we did, we knew Bridgewire had built something. A web of sympathetic inmates, corrupted guards, smuggled relays. He was watching Naraka from the inside, feeding us the pulse of the prison machine in pieces. And now, he'd found something big. Big enough to break cover, big enough to risk everything. We dropped in at night, not that you could tell the difference on Naraka. Sky was ash grey at high noon, black at all other times. The upper atmosphere scraped heat off ships like paint thinner. Even in orbit, the clouds shimmered with static from a storm system that never stopped churning. Insertion team was 4 of us. 2 commandos, 1 slicer, and me. I was field lead. Our way in was a condemned industrial duct, long since rerouted by a collapsed waste corridor. Bridgewire had used it before, stashed dead drops there for months. It smelled like warm rust and wet electronics. We moved in silence, flashlights dimmed, eyes tracking for movement. Bridgewire met us exactly where he said he would. Section D12, maintenance junction, behind a cracked valve panel, hunched between a broken vent and a rusted access rail. He looked thin, like a man whose skin didn't quite fit his bones anymore. Pale, bruised under the eyes with fingernails bitten raw. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, like it had to remember how to speak in full sentences. "You're early." I nodded. We weren't. He was just late in counting. He reached under his tunic and pulled out a sealed disc pouch, mag-locked, one-time use, and he pressed it into my hand. ISB's building something bigger than Naraka. This site has the codenames, transit routes, shift rotations, off-book logs, everything they don't want us to know. His hand shook when he let go. This wins us 5 systems, and he turned to leave. My slicer stepped after him. "Wait, we can take you with us. They'll think you died. We'll stage it, scrub you from the rolls, give him a corpse." He stopped and said, "If I leave, they'll burn it all of it. Everyone I talked to, every guard I flipped, every prisoner who slipped a message under a tray or rewired a panel, gone." He looked back, tired but steady. Let me finish what I started. And then he disappeared into the pipe. We waited 5 seconds longer than we should have. Then I turned and gave the evac signal. He pulled out fast. Hotter now, storm currents picking up. The tunnel groaned with pressure. The filters sputtered. The disc changed everything. 3 weeks later, the rebellion rerouted 5 supply chains away from future raids and mapped 2 new black site facilities in wild space, while also flagging 6 ISP operators for potential leaks. It was an absolute trove. Maybe the biggest single haul of raw intel we'd seen all year. Command called it a success beyond expectations, cited the mission in a sector-wide address. But they never mentioned the man who stayed behind. Sometimes I wonder what happened to him. I wonder if he believed it was worth it. He trusted us to finish the fight he couldn't afford to walk away from. Trusted that we'd do what was needed, and trusted that we'd remember. Okay. I think I've got time for a few more, but we really need some rest. We're not going out on patrol tomorrow, sleep deprived. So, you know what they don't tell you about holding the line? It's not about bravery, it's about math. How long can you hold before the next squad rotates in? How many bolts in your last power cell? How far can you drag a wounded friend before you get dropped too? That's what Bassadro was. A math problem we were never meant to solve. Our team was there for recon. 12 of us, mixed squad, low profile. Empire had started reactivating an old relay facility buried deep in the canyon spine, near a decommissioned mining site the locals called Kessa's Scar. Command wanted eyes on it, maybe slice some power grid logs, check for signals. A simple in and out, until it wasn't. We weren't the only ones interested in that relay. Imperial engineers had landed the night before. One of their patrols spotted our slicer team while they were in the conduit pit. By the time we regrouped, a full platoon of stormtroopers had dropped into the basin. We had 1 uplink, 1 extraction route, and no time to run. We didn't have orders to fight, but sometimes war doesn't care what your orders say. There was a ridge about 300 meters from the facility, low enough to crawl, high enough to slow an advance. We dug in. We didn't think we'd win. We just thought we could buy enough time. The first wave came fast. Scouts mostly. White armor lit gold in the canyon sun. They didn't expect resistance, but we made sure they regretted that. Our scout, a quiet woman from Pentora with the steadiest hands I've ever seen, took out the first 3 from 90 meters with a modded DC-15X. The rest scattered. The second wave came with a walker. Light ATST, fresh paint. It walked down the slope like we didn't exist. We waited until it hit the ridge's base, then blew the charge we'd set on the fuel pipe that ran beneath it. Then, boom. 1 leg gone. It tipped like a dying animal and slammed into the rock face. We cheered, stupidly. It felt good, like we were doing something that mattered. Then, the third wave hit, and it didn't feel so good anymore. They came in waves of 8, tight formations, cover fire. We lost our heavy, caught a bolt to the chest before he could fire his repeater. Dropped like a sack. The worst part wasn't the fighting, it was the waiting between volleys. 10 seconds, 30, sometimes a full minute where the canyon went dead quiet and you didn't know if the next thing you'd hear was boots on gravel or a thermal popping 3 meters behind you. We rotated positions, shifted fire arcs. One of our guys started humming, some old spacer song about the stars being brighter before the war. I wanted to tell him to shut up, but I didn't. We all needed something. We ended up holding for 6 hours, killed 17 Imperials and lost 5 of our own. When extraction came, it was a barely working U-wing limping in on a backup thruster. Pilot yelled at us to move fast. Stormtroopers were flanking north and would have under a minute to load and lift. I was the last one up and looked back once. The ridge was scorched. Blaster marks, blood, smoke twisting into the low purple sky. Command didn't even list it as a full engagement. They marked it skirmish, Bassadro, zone Kessa, tactical impact minimal, personnel loss acceptable, results evacuation successful. I still dream about that canyon, still hear the sounds of boots crunching gravel in my sleep, Still wonder if the relay we stalled ever mattered. But here's the thing no one tells you. Fights don't have to be remembered to mean something. We held. We made the Empire bleed, even if it didn't notice. We kept a dozen more from walking into an ambush, we got the intel out, and we got each other out. Well, most of us. You want a story with glory? Well, this ain't it. But if you want to know what it means to dig in, knowing no one's coming to save you, and do it anyway, then yeah, that was Bassadro. You heard about those rumors of the imps creating some sort of super weapon? No? Well, it might be more than just the rumor. There was this op. We weren't supposed to be operating this close to the core. Even Denon was a stretch. Too bright, too central, too crowded with Imperial analysts pretending to be baristas and surveillance droids dressed as weather monitors. But intelligence said there was a lead. They called it Greycoat. We were 5 months deep into the lead up to what we thought was just another weapons project. At the time, whispers were starting to swirl. Anomalous supply runs, black site construction on desert moons, and a set of resource manifests that made no logistical sense unless you were building something huge and very secret. Problem was, we didn't know what we were looking for. We just knew someone was trying very hard to keep certain systems off the galactic charts, and Greycoat had appeared in a flagged cross-sector manifest routed through the Horrors system, then disappeared and resurfaced here on Denon. The contact was arranged through back channels only 2 people in our cell had access to. We got a location, a laundromat near the perimeter edge of the night strip, open only from 0300 to 0340 local. Inside, there would be 1 attendant. The phrase was simple. Dry heat still best for synthwool? They responded with, for greycoats and ghosts alike, we were on. I was to do the pickup. When I got there, the shop looked like nothing. Dull lights, grease-streaked transparent steel, rows of coin-op processors humming like sleep machines. A holoscreen flickering reruns of a Coruscant cooking show from 3 years ago. I stepped in, 1 man behind the counter, balding, grease under the nails. I dropped the voucher. Dry heat still best for synthwool? He didn't look up. He just reached under the counter, set a data puck down and said, for greycoats and ghosts alike. Here's where it got a bit complicated. He wasn't Greycoat. He was a dead drop keeper. Someone who never asks questions and never survives long in the job. But before I could leave, he grabbed my wrist. Don't activate it here. Not on this level. Not until you're under metal. Under metal? That meant below the Magrail grid. Somewhere deep enough that Imperial scanners wouldn't ping stray bursts. So I ran. Through an alley, through 2 freight lifts and a false service access tunnel behind a carbon shrimp vendor. 3 minutes later, I was under metal and I opened the puck. There wasn't much, just 3 things. A partial transmission trace, encrypted chatter routed through an ISB holding cell near Kessel days before the disappearance of a known engineer flagged for strategic relocation. A shredded cargo log from Toprawa, one the Empire tried very hard to wipe from the trading registry. And a voice clip. It was what the whole mission was really about. It played through my earpiece as static at first, and then came the voice. Male, faint core accent, calm. It's not a weapon, not a fleet. It's a point. 1 point. Enough to erase a city, a world. I gave them the math. I didn't know what it was. Tell them it bends light. Tell them it bends everything. Then, silence. We didn't really know what it was. Not really. But the files Greycoat slipped us, they were infrastructure logs, freight routes, and material manifests that didn't line up. Things being moved off the books across half the outer rim. We had a bad feeling about it. That whatever the Empire was building, it was going to be worse than anything we'd fought so far. We tried to trace the voice, tried to track down the source of the audio. Best guess, it was recorded 3 weeks prior, somewhere between Formos and Geonosis, spliced into a corrupted logistics burst before the source terminal was scrubbed. The laundromat was torched 2 nights later, and the man I spoke to, gone. But there was one more thing. Before the place burned, he made a backup. We don't know how. But weeks later, rebel intelligence intercepted a comm burst in the Atrivis sector, masked as ore shipment logs. Inside, the same voice and a slightly longer clip. New words. You're too late to stop it being built, but not too late to break it once it is. Funny, isn't it? All these grand battles, all these heroes with medals and last stands, but sometimes the ones who change the shape of war are old men in broken shops and rebels who follow a name, a phrase, or a voice through 10 levels of shadow. Alright, it's really getting late now and I'm getting super sleepy. Besides, the fire's dimming and it's getting cold. So let's rug up. But I know you guys are itching for one more. The last one isn't about spies, it's about mud, a ravine, and a moment where I saw one of ours do something stupid, brave, and completely worth dying for. People like to ask you when you joined. I think the better question is why. For some, it's revenge. For others, a friend. A rumor of a massacre somewhere too far away to verify, but close enough to set your blood boiling. But for me, I joined the rebellion because I saw a child cry while holding the hand of a corpse, and the officer responsible said it was an administrative misfire. It wasn't even during some battle or something. It was a census. That's the part no one wants to believe when I tell the story. I was working logistics under the Empire in the Atrivis sector. Civilian contract, moving parts, managing droid labor, tracking ship manifests, the kind of job that keeps your head down and your record clean. It paid well, got me off-world, gave me structure, and after the Clone Wars, that was all most people wanted. It started quiet. One day we got told an inspection team is coming. Data alignment protocol, they called it. Standard thing. Dusty terminals, calibration checks. They brought stormtroopers, but that wasn't strange. They always brought stormtroopers. Then the inspector starts cross-referencing birth records. I remember thinking, why do they care about that? 2 days in, a family on the outer edge of the district gets flagged. Looked like the mother had falsified a date on a planetary work license. Could have been a typo, but the inspector didn't ask. They showed up at the homestead with a full squad and shot the father in front of his wife and in front of their daughter. Right there on the porch, like they were cleaning a stain. They called it a matter of civil compliance enforcement. Said he resisted, said the records justified it. They didn't even take the family in, just left them there. Bodies still cooling in the dust while the officer logged the report. I was the one who transported the replacement droid parts to that district the next day. I saw the little girl still sitting there, just holding his hand. Like if she let go, something worse might happen. I asked the officer what happened. He shrugged and said it was just routine. That was the moment that changed it for me. The shrug. 2 weeks later, I quit. Just packed up, filed my resignation, and left before they could ask questions. At first, I didn't know where I was going. Just wanted to be somewhere that didn't reek of clean uniforms and dirty truths. I drifted for a while. Cargo work, outer rim ports, spent a few months pretending I wasn't looking for something. Pretending the anger wasn't boiling under my skin every time I saw a Star Destroyer coast into orbit like it owned the sky. Then I ended up on Iktoch. There was a fuel depot near the moon's southern hemisphere. Small place. A lot of old veterans pretending they weren't broken and younger workers pretending they weren't trapped. That's where I met the recruiter. She didn't call herself that, just asked questions. Asked what I'd seen, what I believed. I told her the story, told her about the shrug. She just said, "We need people who know the difference between righteous anger and blind rage." She gave me coordinates and told me to think it over. It took me 3 days, and then I went. The first year wasn't heroic. I spent it moving crates, setting up relay stations, watching people smarter than me talk tactics I didn't understand. But I listened, I learned. And when they finally put a blaster in my hands, I used it in the ways I always said I would, to keep monsters out of people's homes. I told myself that anyway. For a while, it worked. Then came the years that followed. After the first raid, the first kill, the first time you see a friend get hit and realize there's no time to save them, the fire in your chest turns into something heavier, like ash settling after a burn. You keep going. You tell yourself the cause still matters, but it gets harder. You start making decisions you hate, start Start telling yourself that the ones who die didn't die for nothing. Start realizing you can't remember all their names. I never went back to that world in the Lothal sector, never saw that girl again, but I think about her more than anyone else. Because that's the moment that started all this. It's the moment I stopped being a bystander, and I wonder if I hadn't quit, if I hadn't walked away, if I hadn't joined the fight, would someone else have done the same? Or would we all still be there, watching stormtroopers turn injustice into routine? So yeah, that's why I joined. Okay. Just because you two are such good listeners, I'm gonna give you one more, but I'm not on sentry duty tonight, and just before I head to sleep, and one of you take sentry duty, figure it out between yourselves, I'm gonna leave you with this. Every now and then, a sap pocket lets go with a soft pop. The rest is silent. Even the forest's gone quiet. Not even the bugs have much to say. Kath's gone lukewarm in my hands, mostly grit now. Doesn't matter, it's warm, and that's enough. The stars are clearer now than they were earlier. War doesn't take your limbs, not first, not even your life if you're lucky. What it takes, what it wants, is your certainty. Strips it clean. Takes the part of you that used to believe in clean lines, that you'd always know what side you were on, that there were sides. You start thinking there are heroes and villains, and maybe you're even one of the good ones. Then the missions pile up. The names get blurry, the choices start tasting like rust, and you stop checking the score. And memory? Memory doesn't help. Memory doesn't care if something happened the way you said. It only cares if it's stuck. Most of what I told you tonight is true. Other bits are stitched together from half memories and borrowed names. Someone I knew, someone I heard about, someone I never met but couldn't forget. Some of those people died, some lived, some maybe never existed at all. At least, not the way I said. But if you're sitting here asking whether that makes the stories worth less, you're not hearing what I'm trying to tell you. Because war doesn't give you closure. It gives you moments. A name you never got to know. A sound you'll never forget. An order that still keeps you up at night. A laugh you heard one time in a trench before a shell hit too close. That's what you carry. Not the ending, just the weight. So no, there aren't clean endings. Those are for the holodramas, for recruitment reels and classroom vids back on the core. One day their bunk's cold and their pack's half packed and no one says a word. You don't ask, because if you ask, you're next. Most of the time, the only way we knew someone was gone was the boots they left behind. Always seemed heavier when someone else had to carry them. You want to know what this job really is? It's carrying ghosts, because you're the last one who remembers, even if you pretend not to. Because some stories won't let you sleep. Some names stay lodged in the space behind your ribs, and sometimes, when the fire's low and the wind's quiet, you catch yourself hoping you misremembered something, even though you know better. That's the truth, or close enough to it. Anyway, that's all I've got for tonight. My legs are acting up and Command's not calling anytime soon. Wake me up if the stars start doing something interesting, or if Command finally remembers we're out here. Whichever comes first.